Hey guys, what's up? Bitch Law. And after listening to the previous episode of Walk Switch Law, I'm making some assumptions about how the how the microphone should be facing. And it should definitely be more off to the side. And I guess if we're being truly technical, facing away from the road, but really more to the side of my face, because I would notice lots of plosives, and obviously that is because I believe I was holding the mic very much right in front of my face. So now I am being a bit wiser and holding the mic to the side of my face, and hopefully this will mitigate that issue as well as sound better. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully it isn't too far away. And like I had also noted, I'm just assuming holding the phone on the side of the street where cars are driving is going to better insulate the silly road noise, meaning the bottom of the phone is facing towards me, and the phone is essentially the meat in the sandwich. I am one slice of bread, and the road noise being the other. Kind of the main thing that came to me while I was at work today that I just wanted to have a bit of commentary on is this idea that always puzzled me, and it makes a lot of sense now that it always puzzled me, because there's kind of this assumption that you make more money as you get older, and that really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Honestly, it seems pretty stupid, and it always did, and I don't know if I had a clear answer for that. And now I do. So now I'm realizing why I think that always puzzled me. First of all, the reason why it puzzled me is because I'm very well aware that when really money early is far more important than money late. So if anything, it makes a lot more sense to ensure a higher baseline than a raise or more money later. And I feel like a lot of people just don't really understand that or think of that. But society would make much more sense and be a lot fairer if people did. Because if anything, you actually need less money later in life. The only thing and the only cost that actually goes up is actually your medical costs. And, that's obviously just due to aging, so you can't really do a whole lot about that. But in terms of basically any other cost, things go down, because the older you get, A, the more likely you already have money saved up as a cushion, and B, you probably already own a house, and once you own a house, your active cost actually plummets, because once you reach homeownership, actually, you know what though, I actually wonder about that. I'm kind of second guessing my whole assertion about this topic, because it is true that property taxes are less expensive than rent, but then if you own a home, you do have to pay for maintenance on the home. So it actually, I kind of wonder, I need to whip out the second phone with data that I don't have to do a quick GPT on this, but that is the truth. The truth is I really do need that second phone. But no, honestly, I won't. In the future, I think I'm going to get the microphone and just hook up an old phone as the text transcription recorder. That's what the plan is. And I'm just using my 16 Pro Max for now because I know that the microphone should be better within it, but I think in the future, but then there is also the CPU issue, because I think the transcription will be kind of slow on an older phone. So, hey, maybe there is an honest reason for me to get another phone. Not that that's really that sad, because I'd kind of be looking for any excuse to do that. But anyway, maybe the iPhone Air is back on the table. How about that? Because it would be for quick transcriptions, to have in addition. I'd have like my primary recording, and then that is like a secondary recording. I think it's pretty crazy to think about that. I truly do need two phones just in order to function in the same way that a lot of people are happy with one. I really would need two or three. But regardless, we're really getting sidetracked. The main point is that once you're an adult, you likely have less expenses. You likely already own a car. You likely already own a home. And at least on surface level, only having to pay property tax is much lower than having to pay rent. And you likely already own a car. So life gets better as you get older, but again, it is fair to assume, I guess you would see some kind of a raise as you get older, but really the minimum baseline is the most important, because it's most important, again, that you make more money as soon as possible. I feel like the only justification for why they don't really push for this is because it could definitely cause problems in terms of, they kind of want to keep the working class needing to work. And if you did front load finances, it would make more sense, but it would have more of a risk of people not needing to work, which obviously that's not how the current system is. It seems like the powers that be want people to be stuck working as much as possible, or at least that's kind of the idea or the impression that I get from things. But yeah, that is kind of the backwards thing about that, but that's not even the profound message. So, as usual, we're 8 minutes in and I didn't even talk about what I actually wanted to talk about yet. So the main thing is that there's obviously in life this expectation that comes about where it's like you're basically expected that the longer you work, the more experience you get paid better, right? And that's kind of the expectation, but that expectation really doesn't make any sense, because a lot of the time, a lot of these older people are a little bit more out of touch and a little bit more, just not as sharp as younger people. And there's oftentimes you're given these manager roles, or whatever you want to call it, really, as like a reward for being at the company for a long time or something. But a lot of these higher ups, I think it's very possible they're just like really out of touch, and they're not really as aware of how the company should be handled and things like that, especially due to especially with things pertaining to potential modern efficiencies that could be implemented, like with technology, for example. I think a lot of older people can run things in a pretty outdated way, honestly, in a lot of companies. It seems like that. And again, I think that problem has to do with leadership just not really having much of an imperative or a reason to push, because they're making a lot of money. And since they're already older, they probably already have money saved up. And so there's basically been this generational snatching that has occurred, very selfish, and it's choked out a lot of the ability for younger people to move up, because now these older people had been a part of the working class when the economy was better for the working class, and then now that they are managers, things are now better for managers, and it's really ends up benefiting older people. And it kind of pertains to my previous point about how I don't really think anybody should be allowed to retire. If nobody can, if not everybody can retire, I don't really see why some people should be able to. And again, it would be fine if it was fair to everybody, but since it's not, like, I don't really see why anybody should be able to retire now if my generation won't be able to. But of course, like, nobody really thinks about that, and everybody just kind of, I don't know, I think people are going to be in for it. I think we'll just leave it at that. I think people are definitely going to be in for it, because I think a lot of people are going to expect retirement and come to find out they won't really be able to. And again, obviously the job market right now, it's incredibly inefficient. There's lots of jobs that maybe aren't necessary, and then people being choked out from working as a result of just sluggishness and inefficiency and selfishness too, you know, because I think something I think is pretty interesting is, at least in America, if every working adult made the same amount of money, it would be $76,000 a year, which I would be very happy with that, because I live pretty efficiently and I don't think I would need any more. I think that in gross pay, the after-tax amount of that, I'd be very happy with. But you know, in terms of a lot of people, I guess they would see that as not enough or something. Some people who make more than that, but really could live a thoroughly happy life on that income. But what it gets even more interesting is if you also include non-working Americans. If everybody made the same amount of money, it would only be 49 or like 46,000. So there's actually, I mean, that's even crazier to think about when you think of what a human equal salary would be in America, besides people just working. It's pretty interesting, isn't it? I feel like that's pretty interesting to think about. I don't think many people really care or have the perspective to care. Maybe that's the right thing to say, like the desire or the perspective to care about those kind of things. But yeah, I think I would be very okay with that being the salary that I have. And it's pretty easy, you know, if you live efficiently. But when you start getting into the lavish and inefficient things about human existence, when you get into, you know, the fancy car companies that overcharge for parts and repairs, when you get into vacations, this is when it starts to get to be a problem to live off of those salaries. And when it's also free market forces that have pushed the costs up for a lot of things, forcing us to have sensors in cars that make the cars way and tech in cars that nobody really wants or asked for. Not only is it market forces, but I'm assuming there's possibly a government component, but I don't know. I mean, maybe there's safety things that like are government rules, but I kind of have a feeling it's not really the government. I think it is just a result of like free market. I know the government has pushed for SUVs indirectly with the bypass of the the new fuel economy regulations. You know, that's been a government problem, not necessarily a free market problem, although it's a free market reaction. So I don't really know. But that is kind of the premise of my point. I think the premise is that I don't think that I've always kind of questioned or been puzzled by that assertion that, oh yeah, you'll just make more money when you get older. It's, you know, you won't always be making that much money. And that always seemed very confusing to me. And I think it's because I've always just thought about it logically, and logically, no, nobody should really be counting on just randomly happening to make more money. Like that is just not not a good way. Like, that shouldn't be how the system is, which is why in my head I was always so puzzled by it. But again, I mean, you do have to keep, I guess, a percentage of the population stuck working, but it's a little bit too far, I think. Like, I don't even know. You know what I mean? It's like way too, it's like there's such a small percentage of people that just have way too much. And I don't even know if I would have a total problem with the inequality from an ethics point of view. I know I've talked about this before. It's like, if those people were truly special and doing things with the money that were very like impressive and good for humanity, I think elitism and some degree of inequality can be a good thing, because you can make the argument that humans can be quite ignorant, and if you just start giving impoverished people tons of extra money, it's not going to really get used for like the greatest things. But we're already so restrictive in that sense. Like, I have a hard time believing that, and I don't see or really understand how rich people do anything better or different with the money. Like, I think most rich people, they do just end up spending it on like the same kind of stuff, whether it's like food, eating out, vacations. Like, I don't really think it matters, but that's like the only argument I can kind of be on board for. Like, it is fine to have inequality. I do think certain people you could trust with money more than others. Some people are, for example, if somebody's just going to waste all their money on like drugs and like really unhealthy food, you could make the argument that that person shouldn't really have as much access to money. But I guess that problem doesn't even stem from a money issue at all in the first place. So actually, that kind of refutes that argument, doesn't it? Because yeah, that I don't know how much I agree with that. Then maybe it should just be that more people have more money. I'm not really sure, but I think you get the premise of what I'm saying. It's that I think it is probably the case generally that money correlates with IQ and judgment, but it's not always. I think there's probably also correlations with greed. You know, most likely if somebody's greedier, they're probably going to be able to become richer easier than somebody who isn't greedy, and that isn't a good trait, or a trait that should be rewarded for obvious reasons, yet it still is, which is, you know, that has its own issues for obvious reasons. Like, you really should not reward a person who's greedy, at least in a developed society. That should not be the case, and yet that's kind of the way it works now. And so I'm for meritocracy when it is benefiting people who deserve it and who are going to use the money to further humanity and or make the world a better place. People who are of a higher cognition, not people who just blindly blow it on food or other silly things. But again, I think what ends up happening is when you let too many people get rich, they actually just end up being more ignorant and less knowledgeable, and ultimately they end up spending more money because now they don't really have to think as hard because they have money to basically buffer what they're doing. So I do think for the most part you probably should have more of an equal spread of income. I'd assume that society is a better society. I can't really see the argument otherwise. You could have an elite that has access to more money and makes more money, but then they should probably be monitored by some AI or something, so that if there's any evidence of greed or other negative traits, that their money would get, like, I don't know, stolen, and their property would get messed up or something. That's what I think, and I've already talked about that for the time being, how that should probably be the case. But anyways, I'm just about out of time. So it's been schla, but now it's time to buy schla. So see ya schla.